In a remote African village far from the busy cities, a boy named Kami was born. His arrival was met with both surprise and confusion. For Kami was not like other children in the village. His skin was pale, almost as white as the first light of dawn, and his hair was the color of golden straw. The villagers, who had never seen anyone like Kami before, began to whisper among themselves. Some were saying, "Is he a ghost?" while others believed he was cursed. But for Amina and Jabari, Kami's parents, he was simply their son, a fragile little boy who needed love and care. Amina, a kind and gentle woman, loved Kami from the moment she held him in her arms. But Jabari, his father, was different. He had always been a proud man, but when Kami was born, that pride turned into shame. He couldn't understand why his son looked the way he did, and the whispers of the villagers only deepened his confusion and anger. Jabari began to withdraw from the family, spending more time away from home, often drinking to forget the burden he felt Kami had brought upon him. As Kami grew older, life in the village became increasingly difficult for him. The other children were cruel, taunting him with names like Ghost Boy and White Demon. They refused to play with him, running away whenever he approached. Kami, who was naturally shy and sensitive, felt the sting of their rejection deeply. He would often hide behind his mother's skirt or sit alone under the shade of the tree near their home. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the village, Jabari came home drunk. His eyes were bloodshot, and his movements were very unsteady as he staggered into the small one-room hut where they lived. Amina was cooking a simple meal of maize porridge, and Kami was drawing pictures in the dirt outside. Jabari's entrance was loud and chaotic, and Kami immediately felt the tension in the air. "Why do you keep bringing that boy around, Amina?" Jabari slurred, his voice thick with alcohol. "He is nothing but trouble. The villagers laugh at us just because of him." Amina's heart sank at Jabari's words, but she kept her voice calm. "Kami is our son, Jabari. He is a gift from the gods, and it is our duty to care for him." Jabari laughed bitterly. "A gift? A curse, you mean? Look at him, Amina. He is not like the other children. He will never be like them." Kami, who had been listening from outside, felt tears welling up in his eyes. He didn't understand why his father didn't love him, why he seemed so angry all the time. He wiped his tears away with the back of his hands and continued drawing, trying to lose himself in the swirls and the shapes he made in the dirt. A few days later, Jabari packed his belongings into a worn-out sack. He avoided looking at Amina as he did so, his face set in a grim expression. "I can't stay here anymore, Amina," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I can't live like this. I'm leaving." Amina's heart shattered as she watched her husband walk out the door without a backward glance. She wanted to call out to him to beg him to stay, but she knew it would do no good. Jabari had made up his mind, and nothing she said would change that. As he disappeared into the distance, Amina turned to Kami, who had been silently watching from the doorway. His big brown eyes were filled with sadness and confusion. "Where is Papa going?" Kami asked, his voice small and uncertain. Amina knelt down and pulled Kami into her arms, holding him tightly. "Papa needs to be away for a while, my love," she said softly. "But don't worry, I am here. I will always be here for you." From that day on, it was just Kami and Amina against the world. Life was hard, but Amina did everything she could to provide for her son. She took all sorts of jobs, washing clothes for wealthier villagers, fetching water from the river, and even working in the fields during the harvest time. The work was exhausting, but Amina never complained. She knew that Kami depended on her, and she was determined to give him the best life she could. But as much as Amina loved Kami, she didn't fully understand his condition. She noticed that his skin burned easily under the harsh African sun, and as his eyes were sensitive to bright light. She tried her best to protect him, keeping him indoors, especially during the hottest parts of the day, and shading his eyes with her hands when they were outside. But she knew it wasn't enough. One day, while Amina was washing clothes by the river, she overheard two women talking about a clinic in the nearby town. They mentioned that the clinic offered free medical services, and Amina's ears perked up. She had never been to a clinic before, but she knew that she needed to learn more about Kami's condition if she was going to take proper care of him. So, the next morning, she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, took Kami by the hand, and set off for the clinic. The journey to the clinic was long and tiring. The sun beat down on them mercilessly, and Amina had to stop several times to let Kami rest in the shade. By the time they reached the clinic, they were both hot and tired and thirsty, but Amina's determination pushed her forward. She approached the front desk, where a young, kind-looking nurse greeted her. "Good day, ma'am," the nurse said with a warm smile. "How can I help you today?" Amina hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain. My son is different," she began. "His skin is very pale and he has trouble in the sun. I don't know what exactly is wrong with him. I want to learn how to take care of him." The nurse nodded understandingly. "It sounds like your son has albinism," she said gently. "It's a condition where the person's skin and hair and eyes lack pigment, making them very sensitive to sunlight. But don't worry, with the right care, your son can live a healthy life." The nurse introduced Amina to a doctor, who took them to a small examination room. The doctor explained more about albinism and how it affected Kami, and what Amina could do to help him. He gave her a wide-brimmed hat to keep Kami from the sun, and a bottle of sunscreen, showing her how to apply it to Kami's skin before they went outside. "Make sure he always wears this hat when he's outside," the doctor advised, "and keep him out of the sun as much as possible, especially during the middle of the day. His skin is very delicate and it's important to protect it." Amina listened carefully, absorbing every word. She was relieved to finally have some answers and grateful for the doctor's help. As they left the clinic, she felt a newfound sense of hope. She was determined to do everything in her power to keep Kami safe and healthy. Back in the village, life continued much the same, but Amina's approach to caring for Kami had changed. She made sure he wore his hat every time they were outside and was diligent about applying sunscreen to his skin. She also noticed that Kami's eyes were often strained in the bright sun, so she began to keep the curtains down and drawn, creating a cooler and dimmer environment for him. With his mother's care and protection, Kami began to thrive. He was a smart and bright, curious child, always asking questions and eager to learn. Amina saw this and realized that Kami's future depended on more than just his health. It depended on education. Though she herself had never been to school, she knew that if Kami could get an education, he might have a chance at a better life. So, when Kami turned 7, Amina decided it was time for him to start school. She took him to the local primary school, where the head teacher, Mr. Kofi, welcomed them. But as Kami walked into the classroom on his first day, He was met with the same hostility he had experienced all his life. The other children started staring at him, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. "Look at him," one boy shouted, pointing at Kami. "He's as white as a ghost." The room erupted in laughter, and Kami felt his face grow hot with shame. He wanted to turn around and run back home, but before he could move, a girl with bright, friendly eyes stood up. "Stop it," she said firmly, glaring at the other children. "He's just like us. Leave him alone." The girl's name was Imani, and from that moment on, she became Kami's protector and friend. Imani took Kami by the hand and led him to a seat beside her. "Don't worry about them," she said. "They don't understand, but I'll help you." Despite Imani's kindness, school was still so difficult for Kami. A boy named Yaro was a bigger and older boy than most of the other kids, and took a particular dislike to Kami. Yaro was also known as the school bully, and he saw Kami as an easy target. Every day, Yaro would find new ways to torment Kami, tripping him in the hallway, hiding his books, or calling him cruel names. One afternoon, during lunch, Yaro decided to take things even further. As Kami sat alone under a tree, eating the small meal his mother had packed for him, Yaro and his friends approached. "Hey, ghost boy," Yaro sneered, kicking dirt into Kami's food. "Why don't you go back to wherever you came from? You don't belong here." Kami tried to ignore him, but Yaro grabbed the food and threw it on the ground. Kami's stomach growled with hunger, and tears welled up in his eyes. "What's the matter? Going to cry?" Yaro taunted, laughing cruelly. Before Kami could respond, Imani appeared. She stepped between Kami and Yaro, her eyes blazing with anger. "Leave him alone, Yaro," she shouted. "What has he done to you?" Yaro glared at Imani, but didn't back down. "He's a freak, Imani. Just look at him." Imani stood her ground. "He's not a freak. He's my friend, and you have no right to treat him like this." Yaro's face twisted with anger, but he didn't want to fight Imani. Instead, he turned and stalked off. Imani knelt down beside Kami, picking up the food that had fallen on the ground. "Are you okay?" she said softly, her voice full of concern. Kami nodded, though he didn't feel okay. He was tired of being different, tired of being bullied, but Imani's kindness gave him a small glimmer of hope. She had stood up for him when no one else would, and that meant the world to Kami. As the years passed by, Kami and Imani's friendship grew stronger. They spent their days together, studying and playing, and dreaming of a bright and better future. Imani encouraged Kami to focus on his studies, telling him that education was the key to changing his life. Kami took her words to heart. He threw himself into his schoolwork, spending long hours reading, writing, and practicing his art. Kami's love for drawing became his escape from the harsh realities of his life. He would sit under the big tree for hours, sketching scenes from his imagination, beautiful landscapes, animals, and people. His drawings were full of life and color, a stark contrast to the grey and difficult world he lived in. One day, as Kami was drawing, Mr. Kofi, the head teacher, happened to walk by. He stopped to watch Kami's work. Impressed by the details and the creativity in his drawings, "Kami," Mr. Kofi said, sitting down beside him, "these drawings are amazing. Have you ever thought about entering the art competition?" Kami looked up surprised. "Sir, art competition?" "Yes," Mr. Kofi replied. "There is a national art competition coming up, and I think you should enter. You have a real good talent, Kami, and I believe you could do very well." Kami felt a flutter of excitement, but also a twinge of fear. What if they don't like my drawings? He said quietly. What if they laugh at me? Mr. Kofi smiled kindly. It's normal to feel scared, Kami, but you have something special. Don't let fear hold you back. You'll never know what you can achieve unless you try. With Mr. Kofi's encouragement, Kami decided to enter the competition. He spent weeks working on his piece, pouring out his heart with every stroke of the pencil. Imani would often sit with him to offer support and ideas as he worked. When the day of the competition arrived, Kami felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. He traveled to the city with Mr. Kofi and Imani, where the competition was being held. The city was unlike anything Kami had ever seen. Tall buildings, busy streets, and people everywhere. He was overwhelmed, but it was also exhilarating. The competition took place in a large but bright gallery, filled with artwork from children all over the country. Kami's piece was displayed alongside dozens of others. As he looked around, he couldn't help but feel a little intimidated. The other children's work was also so impressive, and Kami began to doubt himself. But Imani squeezed his hand and gently whispered, "You've got this, Kami. Your drawing is amazing as well." When the judges finally made their rounds, Kami watched nervously as they examined his work. They whispered to each other, nodding and pointing at different parts of his drawing. Kami's heart was pounding in his chest, and he held his breath, waiting for their decision. After what felt like eternity, the judges stood up, and the head judge stepped forward and announced the winners. Kami could hardly believe his ears when they called his name. He had won first place. Tears of joy filled Kami's eyes as he walked up to accept his prize, a scholarship to a prestigious art school in the city. The audience applauded, and Kami felt a warmth spread round his chest. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen and appreciated. After the competition, as they walked through the city streets, Kami turned to Imani, his eyes shining with happiness. "I can't believe this," he said. "I never thought something like this could happen to me." Imani smiled, her eyes reflecting the same happiness. "I always knew you could do it, Kami. You are going to do great things." With the scholarship, Kami moved to the city to attend the school. It was a new beginning for him, a chance to leave behind the pain and struggles of his past. The city was full of opportunities, and Kami embraced them with open arms. He made new friends, learned new techniques, and grew as an artist. His talent flourished, and soon, his artwork began to gain recognition beyond the school walls. But Kami never forgot where he came from. He stayed in touch with Imani and, of course, his mother, writing them letters and visiting whenever he could. Amina was incredibly proud of her son, and she displayed his letters and drawings with pride in their small hut. Back in the village, life was not so kind to Yaro. Without the discipline of the school and the guidance of teachers, Yaro fell into a life of recklessness. He started skipping school, hanging out with the wrong crowd, and getting into more trouble. His once bright future dimmed as he made one bad choice after the other. Years passed, and Kami's success continued to grow. He became known not just for his art, but also for his inspiring story. He used his platform to raise awareness about albinism and also to advocate for children with the condition. He started a foundation to support children living with albinism, providing them with care, education, and resources they needed to thrive. One day, Kami received a tragic news. Yaro, the boy who had bullied him for so many years, had died in a car accident. He had been drinking and driving, and his car had crashed into a tree. the news hit Kami hard. Despite everything Yaro had done to him, Kami couldn't help but to feel a deep sadness. Yaro's life had taken a tragic turn, and Kami wondered if things could have been different if someone had reached out to him. When Kami returned to the village for Yaro's funeral, he found himself standing once again under the big tree, the place where he had spent so many lonely days as a child. The village had changed little over the years, but Kami's perspective had changed greatly. He was no longer the scared, lonely boy who was bullied and ostracized. He was now a successful artist, a voice for those who couldn't speak for themselves, and a beacon of hope for children just like him. Imani joined him under the tree, just as she had done so many times before. "It's strange being back here," Kami said quietly, his eyes scanning the familiar landscape. "So much has changed, but this place, it feels the same." Imani nodded. "This village will always be part of who you are, Kami, but you've grown beyond it. You've shown everyone who you really are." Kami smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. "I couldn't have done it without you, Imani. You were the only one who stood by me when no one else would." Imani returned the smile, her eyes full of warmth and pride. "We all need someone to believe in us, Kami. I'm glad I was the person who did that for you." Kami continued to visit the village regularly, using his success to give back to the community that once shunned him. He built a school, funded scholarships, and started programs to educate the villagers about albinism and other conditions. His foundation grew, reaching children all over Africa, ensuring that no child would ever have to face the struggles he had endured alone. And so, Kami's story became a legend in the village, a tale of the boy who, despite all odds, rose above his circumstances to become a beacon of hope and change. The children of the village, including those who had once bullied him, grew up hearing his story and learning from his example, as well as aspiring to follow his footsteps. In the end, Kami's legacy was not just his heart or his success, but the lives he touched and the people he inspired. He had turned his pain into purpose, his struggles into strength, and his dreams into reality. And in doing so, he showed the world that true beauty lies not in the color of one's skin, but in the courage, kindness, and creativity that one brings into the world. Years later, as Kami looked out at the world he had helped to shape, he knew that he had fulfilled his destiny. He had not just changed his own life, he had changed the lives of countless others, and that, he knew, was the greatest masterpiece he could ever create. The end.